Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm excited to share how to make one of my most beloved dishes, pastel. Today we're going to be focusing on two key steps in making the perfect Trinidad pastel: how to wrap them neatly and how to boil them to perfection. I'm going to walk you through my technique for wrapping pastel like a pro. This step is very crucial for keeping all that flavorful filling intact during your cooking process. Firstly, of course, you want to make sure you have everything you need: your cornmeal dough, your filling, which would be either your minced beef or your minced chicken, as well as your banana leaves, your oil, and your foil, because I am using foil for this. Having these materials prepared is going to make your organization of wrapping your pastel so much easier as well as so much faster. Of course, you want to start by brushing your leaves with some oil, and this is going to help your dough not stick to your pastel press. And what I usually like to do is I like to put a piece of plastic wrapping, or you can use banana leaves as well, on top of that dough before actually pressing down on your pastel press. That is going to ensure that you have an evened out dough for when it's time to fill your pastel. And once your pastel is opened out, you want to make sure and put sufficient enough of filling in your pastel, and then begin to fold your pastel just like you are seeing here. And I like to make sure that my leaves are fit snug on my pastel, so you want to carefully fold one side at a time and then fold the bottom pieces just like you are tucking or folding an envelope. And this allows your pastel to be wrapped very neatly. Secondly, you want to apply your foil as a second protection layer for your pastel, because when your pastel goes to boil, you don't want any water or liquid to seep in and allow your pastel to become very soggy. I like to double up on my pastel wrapping with foil just like this. The next step, of course, once you have completed wrapping your pastel, is to boil your pastel. You can choose to boil them or steam them, but because I'm boiling them in huge batches, I am going to choose the method of boiling. And of course, you can see I have a big pot here, and one of my secrets is to ensure that I utilize my kettle in this case, and I always boil my water in my kettle beforehand. And I like to fill my pot just about half. I'm not going to overfill them, because when your pastel goes in, the water level is going to rise. So here you're gonna see me adding in my pastel one at a time, and I'm just counting them in as I apply them to the pot of boiling water. And I also salted my water at the beginning of this process. Of course, you would have noticed that I added salt to my water. I always add salt to my water prior to adding in my pastels, right? This pot holds approximately 24 pastels, so 2 dozen pastels. And you want to have your water hot and allow it to boil gradually, not a vigorous boil, but just a gentle boil, because you don't want that vigorous boil to tear or rip through your foil and allow water to seep through your pastels. This is going to cause your pastel to burst, and we don't want that, right? Our pastels now are going to be covered down and be boiled for 30 to 35 minutes. This time would vary based on how much pastel you have put in your pot to boil, but the average time frame is 30 to 35 minutes. I allowed mine to boil for 35 minutes. Once this timer has ended, you're going to see me now lift that cover off of my pot, and I'm going to begin taking out my pastel one by one, and you would see me lightly draining that pastel before I add it into my bowl on the side counter. And the reason for this is I don't want any additional water that would have possibly got in during the boiling process to remain within my pastel and allow my pastel to become watery. Yes, we have 2 layers of protection for our pastel, but we want to make sure that no additional water has seeped through our pastel cooking process. So I like to make sure that I drain it out effectively, or as much of the water as I can get out, if any got in, before adding it to my bowl. And what I would usually do is once I start putting them into my bowl on the counter, I like to apply a little tap once I put them in, just to kind of flatten them, make sure that they maintain that shape. Because sometimes what tends to happen is that because a little bit of water would have seeped through, because I'm not using a steamer and I chose to boil my pastel, water will get into a point. It's just how you manage that water level and how you manage how much water would have gotten through your pastel, if any. So you would see me holding my spoon from all different angles just to ensure that I get out all, if not majority, of the water that would have happened to seep through my pastel. And even while my pastel is being placed in to my bowl, I am not going to immediately open out my pastel. I want this to sort of cool just a little, very little. I still want a hot pastel, but I don't want a cold pastel. I want my pastel to cool just a little and retain back that shape of the pastel that we would have initially folded at the beginning of the process. Now be careful during this draining process, because it's hot water that you're dealing with and you don't want to burn yourself. Also to note, because I am boiling my pastel in big batches, because my recipe does cater for having a minimum of 4 dozen pastels, right? I reuse the same pot with water, and I just top up the water level to half, because of course water would have evaporated during this boiling process. So what I ended up doing is I just had a hot kettle of water on standby, ready for when I finished draining out all of my pastel from the first batch, and I topped up the water level and allow this to come to half the pot again before adding in my second batch of pastel. So usually this pot would allow me to boil my 4 dozen pastels in just about an hour after finishing putting together or assembling my pastels. However, of course, if you do have a bigger pot than what I have and you are able to boil more than 24 pastels in the first one, you will finish much faster. But this is just the method that I use with the resources that I do have. And that completes our draining process. Now it's time to allow our pastel to cool and drain off properly before we taste them. And now our pastel is ready to serve once it has been cooled. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this step-by-step guide to wrapping and boiling your pastel was helpful. If you enjoyed this video or learned something new, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who loves traditional dishes, especially traditional Trinidad dishes. So let me know in the comments if you have any tips or tricks for making pastels, and don't forget to subscribe for more delicious content. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.